Welcome to the newest episode of Beatin' and Bangin'. I'm your host, Kyle Dalton. In today's video, we're going to recap yesterday's Cup race at Richmond, including some interesting team radio conversations during the race by Austin Dillon and Ty Gibbs. Plus, we'll talk about the beginning of the race using wet tires for the first time in an official points-paying race, and that finish, and whether or not Hamlin jumped the restart. However, before we get to that, let's follow up on the conflict that started brewing the week before at Circuit of the Americas, when Kyle Busch wasn't happy with Christopher Bell after the race and confronted his former Joe Gibbs Racing teammate on pit road. This weekend at Richmond, the two-time champion was asked about the conversation he had with Bell during the week. Take a listen.
Just to give more of my side than what I said on pit road, to have him give a greater understanding into my objectives and what I got going on versus what he might think that he's got going on. And I think he understood that, and then heard his side of it, and didn't really believe much into it when I didn't even give consideration to him making a move because he was 4 lengths back, and then all of a sudden he was there, So, I knew he was back there, but too far to do anything, and I got hit. So, it is what it is.
So how do you race him forward? Do you race him any differently?
Run him harder for a little bit until he concedes that, he's sorry on the racetrack, and then get back to normal.
First, Busch admits he wasn't buying what Bell had to say and then said he will race him hard until he concedes that he's sorry on the racetrack. Very KFB of him. Not exactly sure what that looks like, but I'm here for it. And now, let's move on to Sunday's race. I have to say, like everyone else, I was super interested in what might happen racing on the wet tires at Richmond. I know last year at the All-Star race in that first heat, we saw the wet tires put on a good show. Everyone was hoping for the same thing this time around. When the green flag dropped, you could sense the tension as the drivers went into those first few corners around the 3/4-mile track at competitive speed. To the drivers' credit, there weren't any incidents. Once again, the wet tires didn't disappoint. Kudos to NASCAR for developing this tire, which allowed the race to get started under the wet conditions in just a 15-minute delay. Normally, in the past, that would have been at least 30 minutes to an hour. It was an overall positive getting the start on a wet track. But the competition caution at lap 30 that lasted until lap 48, yes, 18 laps, was a bit much. NASCAR has to do better on that. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only questionable decision by the sanctioning body on the day. The next came on lap 170 in stage 2, when officials put out the yellow for an incident with Kyle Busch. I use the term incident loosely because it wasn't much of one. Take a look.
You seem, man, it's almost like a brake issue or maybe a right front down, Kevin?
Yeah, the car definitely went straight.
Not a right front.
Oh, it's definitely not down.
Before knowing the cause for the caution, Fox's Mike Joy said Kyle Busch had bounced off the wall and that may be the reason for the caution. In other words, he wasn't sure, and it was hard to believe that that was worthy of a caution. I agree. NASCAR always says it throws cautions when it's deemed that there might be a situation for additional contact and putting the drivers in danger. If you look at the replay, Busch was completely by himself at the top of the track, with no one even close. I mean, not even close. And what's amazing to me is to see how fast the yellow lights start flashing. It's within a second after Busch hits the wall. Someone in the tower had a quick trigger finger, or as longtime NASCAR fans have called them, phantom cautions. Just one of those shake your head kind of moments. Unfortunately, NASCAR wasn't done. More on that in a bit. In that second stage, there were a couple of other things of note. First was the comment of Busch's Richard Childress Racing teammate, Austin Dillon, who was not pleased and let it be clear over the team radio. "We have dumbass strategy every blanking week," he said. "We're indecisive. We don't know what to do." To which team owner Richard Childress responded, "Settle down, drive the car and focus here. It ain't doing no good talking. Just focus." Yowza. We know Kyle Busch hasn't been happy lately with the team's pit crew, and there were multiple changes as a result. But Dillon calling out his team for bad strategy every week is next level stuff, and definitely not a good look. Speaking of drivers getting upset over their team radio, I was listening to the number 54 of Ty Gibbs in that same stage after he got nabbed for a speeding penalty. I reported several weeks ago how Kevin Harvick encouraged the young JGR driver to stop pushing the talk button on his radio, and it would be good for him. The youngster ignored Harvick's advice then and did it again on Sunday at Richmond, expressing his frustration on a couple of occasions.
More lasting on this stupid-ass stage. Try to arc it out, and I can't f***ing turn in the center of the corner. And I just get keeled off the corner, and I'm passenger.
Fox also aired Gibbs' comments later when he talked about Daniel Suarez and owing him someday. It was a bad day, relatively speaking, for Gibbs, who finished 16th and ended his consecutive top 10 streak at 5 races, dating back to the second race at Atlanta. In that final stage, Gibbs' teammate Martin Truex Jr. was clearly the dominant car. He pulled out front and stayed there. During the last 20 to 30 laps, the Fox booth was convinced that Hamlin was going to catch his teammate on a green flag run with fresher tires. They forgot to factor in Joey Logano was in between. In those final laps, despite Logano closing within a half a second, it appeared Truex was all but guaranteed his first win of the season, until he wasn't. On the lap before the white flag lap, Kyle Larson got loose, checked up, and Bubba Wallace got into the left rear of the number 5 car, which went sliding sideways and brought out the caution. Now that was a legitimate reason for a caution, NASCAR. In the first overtime race of 2024, Hamlin got a jump on the restart. It was obvious that he got an early jump. Even Harvick and Boyer in the booth acknowledged it when it happened. But NASCAR deemed it a clean restart. A few laps later, Hamlin won, and then everyone saw the aftermath as Truex was not happy following the race and drove it into the rear of Hamlin several times and banged doors with Larson. While there was initially some confusion on the broadcast as to what the 2017 champion was upset about, he made it clear over the team radio.
Thanks for the teammate running me up the fucking track. He jumped the fucking start, James.
Yes, he did. He went way before the restart zone.
Yeah, well, they better do something about it.
While Truex was understandably upset, he really shouldn't have been surprised by Hamlin's move and sliding him up the track. The number 11 pilot has made it a trademark move and done it repeatedly in the past, including last year to Kyle Larson at Pocono. Here's what Truex had to say about it back then.
But I feel like I picked the right lanes, and I did exactly what Denny did, other than running through, pushing the 5 car too deep in the corner and then run him in the fence off of 2. So, he kind of took it that extra little bit, I guess, to make it a little bit dirty. And, I didn't. So maybe that's, the difference why he won and I didn't.
He called it dirty, but then his last words were prophetic. Maybe that's why he won and I didn't. I have to believe that Truex is thinking the same thing this morning. And going forward, any driver should know if Hamlin gets on the inside on a late restart, he's going to slide them up the track and force them to decide between hitting the wall or lifting. Either way, it's a losing proposition. He knows that's the way the arrow works on these cars, and he's used it to his advantage time and time again. As for the restart, I'm not going to go into detail on it. Everybody saw what happened. It was obvious. My guess is the drivers will get warned, and if this happens again this season, there will be some sort of penalty coming. After the race, I thought there were a couple of interesting remarks, starting with Truex. His frustration continued, and he directed it at his teammate.
I felt like 11 used me up down there in turn 1, and so I didn't really appreciate a teammate racing me like that. I wish he would have gave me a chance.
And Larson talked about his visit and apology from Bubba Wallace, and interestingly brought up their history.
I guess, I would have been pissed off if I would have fully spun, and his comments or his apology probably wouldn't have mattered as much right now, but I would eventually gotten over it. But, it's because I kept going straight and, he came up, whatever, it's good. So we've had our run-ins, and I don't think tonight was anything intentional.
While it wasn't intentional, with that past history, all I could think back to was what Brad Keselowski had to say last week at Circuit of the Americas when I asked him about who he thought should be NASCAR's top rivalry.
Oh, Chase Elliott and Bubba Wallace. It's easy. They got the two biggest fan bases. If you get those two mad at each other, it'd be great.
Funny enough, it was Wallace's boss, Hamlin, who got the most votes by his fellow drivers to be in a top rivalry. But no one selected his teammate, Truex, to join him. It may not become a rivalry, but I'm sure it made for a very awkward competition meeting at the very least. All right, guys, that'll do it for this episode. I want to get your thoughts on a variety of topics, starting with what Kyle Busch had to say about Christopher Bell and the expected apology before the race. As for the race, what did you think of those first 30 laps on the wet tires? And what did you think of Austin Dillon's comments? Is there trouble brewing at RCR? And lastly, I want to know your thoughts on the race ending, including the restart by Hamlin and what happened between him and his teammate Truex. Did Hamlin use him up, or was it just racing, as Harvick said on the broadcast? And finally, one last piece of business. I want to congratulate Ken Young. He's a newsletter subscriber and the winner of a Coda hat for commenting on my top rivalry video. Remember, if you want to be eligible to win prizes, sign up for my email newsletter at beatingandbanging.com, where you'll get my weekly email newsletter every Friday recapping the top stories from the week, including reviews of the various NASCAR-related podcasts. I'm sure Mr. Hamlin will have plenty to say this week on his. And remember to check out my writing at heavy.com and beatingandbanging.com. Thanks as always for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.